a encantadora e hospitaleira capital de Minas Gerais.
Usually when I'm in front of a crowd, I have a guitar in my hand because I'm a singer. But 7 years ago, after traveling and looking out the van window with my bandmates moving across Canada and the US and different places in the world, I came back to the farm that I grew up in Toronto, just outside of Toronto, the most densely populated area in all of Canada. And I came back to the farm my parents still live on, and I realized how incredible a place it was. I realized how beautiful it was, comparing it to all these other places that I'd seen. And in fact, I had kind of missed the boat because in 1990, UNESCO had recognized the same thing, and they designated the Niagara Escarpment, which is where my family's farm is, a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve. And the Niagara Escarpment, it starts basically in Niagara Falls, and it goes for 700 or so kilometers through southern Ontario, and it's a rock ridge corridor. And it's got close to 50% of the province's rare and endangered species. And of course, UNESCO recognized it as an ecologically valuable place in our world. And 7 years ago was the same time that I discovered, as did other people living in this area, that a large multinational corporation called Lafarge was applying to blast a giant hole in the center of this plateau, this area of the Niagara Escarpment, because they wanted to get to the rock that was close to the surface, even though what was on top of the rock was all of this incredible biodiversity. And so we started a community group, and we decided to get organized, and we decided to learn about this place and protect what we knew was so valuable to everyone. And this particular place is called Mount Nemo, and Nemo is a Latin word for no one. It means no one, no man. And it made it fitting in that it belonged to everyone, this place, Mount Nemo. And so we set out, as I'm sure you've heard the film Finding Nemo. Well, our job was saving Nemo. So we started this group. Now Canada is a young, relatively young country, and for the last few hundred years we have operated with a frontier mentality. We have thought that it's an endless bounty of forests and water and resources, and so we've continued at a great pace. We haven't recognized the finite qualities of our drinking water and these precious resources. But as I was learning as a young Canadian, we all rely so heavily and entirely on our land and on our water and on our ability to grow food. Much like indigenous cultures have known from the beginning, that land creates us, makes us possible, and it also makes our art possible. So I realized that as a musician, what I was going to be part of and what I was going to contribute in saving Nemo was my art. I knew that I had been moved by art over the years when place had been mentioned in different songs or different stories or different poems. I remember as a kid learning the song, This Land Is Your Land, Woody Guthrie's classic. And I learned the Canadian version, which I thought was the original version. And I remember hearing place names that I knew belonged to me, that were part of my country, and I knew it made me feel special. And I knew even later, as an adult, when I was in the city of London, England, and I was traveling mostly by myself in a massive city in the world, and I was feeling a little lonely, I went into a bookstore one night, and I happened to see a book of poetry by a Canadian poet and novelist, Michael Ondaatje. And I picked up this book, and I opened up a page, and I saw a poem called Near Elginburg. And I had just moved to this tiny town that no one's ever heard of, called Elginburg. And I for that moment, realized that I was not alone and that I was bigger than myself and that this place was bigger than itself. It had been made bigger by this art. So I decided that I would write a song to start, to tell the story of what was going on Mount Nemo, about this massive quarry proposal. And so I wrote a song called Escarpment Blues, and it talks about the well water, and it talks about this incredible place that is the birthplace of so many tributaries, that has endangered species, that has the oldest trees east of the Rocky Mountains, these white cedars that cling to the cliff faces there. And I wrote this song, and then I talked to my band, and we decided to do a tour of the Niagara Escarpment. We did the I Love the Escarpment tour, and so we hiked for about 2 weeks along this rock ridge corridor, along the Bruce Trail, which is a continuous footpath, and we played shows at different community halls along the way, and we camped, and we talked to people that lived along the escarpment about how precious a place it is. Now, when we would do our walks, and when I would be on my parents' farm, walking through the forest and walking through the fields and looking at the ponds and the wetlands, I remember early on there were times where I thought, okay, give me a sign. Let me know, that I'm, speaking to the planet and it's speaking to me. And in those spiritual moments when you're in a beautiful place, and I was, thinking, okay, I want to see the owl fly out of the tree, and I want the coyote to cross my path. And, that didn't happen. But what happened is the most powerful creature that ended up crossing my path, figuratively, was one that only came out at night, that only came out at certain times of the year, that otherwise was burrowed down under the leaves in the forest and under the soil. And it was a salamander. And in particular, it was the Jefferson salamander, which in Canada is an endangered species. And it's considered an indicator species because when you find salamanders in an ecosystem, it means that the rest of the ecosystem is rich and vibrant and healthy because they're a very sensitive species. They live in the water, they live on the land. And so we turned out we called the government to bring biologists because we thought we probably had the right type of landscape, these forests, these upland deciduous forests, for these salamanders. And sure enough, they found a viable population of Jefferson salamanders living in the forests on my family's farm. My parents have lived on the farm for over 40 years, and we had no idea that there was an endangered species living in the back forest. So it was a wonderful discovery because there's legislation and protection for this species, and we have been involved for 7 years fighting alongside different levels of government who have mostly rejected the proposal, and we have been working to make sure the science comes to the table and makes the decision to protect Mount Nemo for future generations, part of a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve that you would think was completely off limits to large industry, but which industry has lobbied very successfully to at least have these applications contemplated. And wouldn't you know, we find this viable population of these little nocturnal, slimy salamanders. And my friends Kate and Chris are in New York, and they just so happen, coincidentally, to be writing a song for another project called Salamandre. So my point today is that we live in a world where we are so much made alive and so much supported and really sustained by the living world, by our soil, by our water, and by our forests, and that the symbiotic relationship and the inspiration that we are given by this incredible planet and this living world, therefore, to use our art and to use our imaginations as a tool to tell the story and to express what we feel about these places. And I have faith from my experiences that when we do express these things that are dear to us, when songs are written about Mount Nemo and the Niagara Escarpment and salamanders, people become more, these things become more beloved to us, and they become more important, and we begin to revere them more. And so I would like to encourage everyone to use their creative imaginations to look at places in the world, look at places in their own lives that are important to them. Write a story, write a poem, make a joke, take a picture, and use your art in a symbiotic way to give back to the land that is giving so much to you. Thank you.